You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I'm Ethan Haristadoulou. It's Tuesday, bright and early in the morning, coming off the heels of Monday Night Football, where the Green Bay Packers pitched the very first shutout of the season against the Saints, coming away with a win, 34 to a giant goose egg. It was a game, I guess you could say. Obviously not super entertaining. I'm sure if you were a Packers fan, you really enjoyed it. But a lot happened this week. We're going to dive into the rankings. We're going to re-rank all the teams from 32 to first, going through the tier list here. Obviously up on the screen right now, if you're looking, these are last week's rankings. So we'll go ahead, we'll reset the board and start our way from the bottom to the top. So I invite you all, comment down below. Let me hear your thoughts on this weekend's games, where all the teams stand in your eyes. What am I getting right? What am I getting wrong? Let me hear some of your power rankings. Fire away in that comment section. But starting at the very bottom, the number one overall pick contenders category here at number 32. And they've been here for at least the better part, I think, of a month now at this point here. The New York Giants. The Browns are at 31, the Patriots at 30, the Titans sitting at 29, the Jacksonville Jaguars at 28, and then the Las Vegas Raiders rounding out the category with a big win, but maybe not a welcomed win by their fan base, but a win nonetheless. But we start first with the Giants, and a 34-7 loss to the Atlanta Falcons, which included a couple of pick sixes, just about sums up the way this season has gone for New York. They are staying the course. They are hot on the trail of that number one overall pick in this year's NFL draft. And at this point now, it's the Giants' pick to lose. And a conversation I had with a coworker earlier, earlier today when I'm recording this at like midnight, but I'm curious what happens with Daboll and Shane, because it feels like this is a team that isn't really trying, but I'm not hearing a ton of chatter regarding anyone getting fired. And it almost, like from an outsider's perspective, looking in, feels like this is like a backdoor type of lose out. You guys can pick your quarterback and go from there type deal. I don't really know, because, I mean, obviously Daniel Jones wasn't who Daboll selected, and I'm just curious how that's all playing out right now. It's very interesting because I feel like it's a little bit quiet for a team that's sitting at 2-13 right now, on the cusp of kind of resetting and going forward with a new franchise quarterback, I would assume. But just an interesting state for the 2-13 Giants to be in right now. To be fair, maybe there's some noise that I'm missing here as I try to, pay attention to the entire league, but that's just kind of, again, outside looking in point of view. The Browns at 31. This team, pretty much like the Giants, but they're cooked and they're ready for next season, plain and simple. I have more of a question about the Browns right now than anything else, because this is also another conversation I had the other day. Browns fans, this is for you specifically. Would you be interested in the idea, now that Kirk Cousins is set to be released by the Falcons, would you be interested in maybe signing Kirk Cousins as a bridge, considering, I believe if I'm remembering correctly, the Browns are sitting at number 5 in the draft order, with the Raiders in front of them or behind them at 6, and then it's like Jaguars, Titans, Patriots, Giants, maybe not that exact order, but I know it's like Giants, Patriots, and then Titans, Jaguars mixed in there somewhere. Would you be interested in signing Kirk for like a $2 million deal while the rest of his deal is paid off by Atlanta, and then just outright releasing Deshaun Watson and maybe seeing what Kirk Cousins has left in the tank? I know it's obviously been a really ugly season here, but for Kirk Cousins, that is, and I guess in Cleveland, but I would be interested, in my opinion, I would be interested in just kind of seeing how maybe that as like a bridge kind of works itself out for Cleveland. I don't know if that's obviously how that would go down, but I mean, it's not like Kirk Cousins is too unfamiliar with the Midwest, so just an interesting kind of thought that I'd pass along to you, run by, and I would love to hear from you. The Patriots at number 30. Starting out with a 14-0 lead, you're leading at halftime, and then I don't really know what the hell happened from there. And I feel like the swing pass from Drake May to, I believe it was Ramondre Stevenson, if I'm remembering correctly. I believe it was him that was in on the play. At your own goal line, essentially, you can say what you want about like the throw and the execution of the play. That is just a borderline no call in that situation, because there's too much risk as opposed to reward in that scenario there. I really disagree with the play call altogether. I just feel like you had a shot to really pull off a massive upset. You kind of caught Buffalo, I would say, maybe sleepwalking into this game here, and you jumped out to a 14-0 league, kind of turtle shelled, got conservative, and then it felt like tried to hang on to a 14-0 victory, which was just never going to happen against Buffalo. And then, obviously you have the touchdown late that made the game close, but that was a garbage time score, in my opinion, that, kind of set you up and made the score look closer than the game actually was, because you went on a 14-0 run and then you were outscored 24-0. And once Buffalo got it figured out, got going on the ground, just not a great performance. And I guess another question for you Patriots fans, did this game in any shape or way make you feel like maybe Gerard Mayo's a little bit more deserving of sticking around following this offseason? Again, let me know. The Titans at 29. If there was ever, I guess, a thought, maybe if you had one, that maybe Mason Rudolph could be the guy for you, at least in the interim, I would say that his 3 interceptions have helped you find out that he is not going to be the guy going forward, and that Tennessee should absolutely be looking for a quarterback this offseason, whether it's through the draft, depending on how things shake out the next few days and where you will be positioned-wise in the draft order, or maybe the Titans being a wild card team to go after a guy like maybe Sam Darnold if he leaves Minnesota. I would actually be personally interested in seeing something along those lines, but I'm very curious to hear what you all think, Titans fans. So let me know. What are you thinking? Draft a quarterback, sign a guy like Sam Darnold after the season he has. I think he has, if I'm not mistaken, 32 touchdowns to 11 picks, I think is what the number was. So, at this point now, it feels like Sam Darnold in one of these new age offenses with all these young OCs or just offensive-minded coaches that are now taking over head coaching gigs, Brian Callahan obviously being one of them. Maybe something, magical could happen there, and Sam Darnold has a career resurgence the rest of the way if he ends up not sticking around in Minnesota. The Jaguars at 28, 2 turnovers, nearly 10 minutes less of time of possession, only 15 first downs, and a 40% conversion rate on third downs. Kind of sum up what this offense is with Mac Jones at the helm and just a decimated offense by injury. The one bright spot to take away, you have Brian Thomas Jr., and he's an absolute stud. So looking towards the future, you at least have that to work with here, as Brian Thomas Jr. is having himself one hell of a rookie season, if you ask me. The Raiders then round out the group at number 27. I've got to say that, just speaking as a football fan, I respect the fight and the will to win in this situation here, because you're in pole position going into this game for that number 1 overall pick. But the reality is, and this is something that I'm obviously I've seen the split fandom, or I would say maybe more so leaning towards the pick side than this is a good sign win type of deal from that side of the fan base. But there's an obvious split. And the way I look at it is, there's no guarantee for the players on this team this year, aside from a few guys, and of course the coaching staff, that they're going to be around next season to benefit from what could have been that first overall pick. And Pierce even said it himself in a press conference, we don't do this to lose. So while I understand if you're like a Raiders fan hoping for that number 1 overall pick and controlling the draft and all that could come with that, you have to understand at the end of the day, there are people on that team, whether it's players and coaches, that are not going to be around next year, and they are coaching/playing their asses off to make sure that they can get a job somewhere else next year. And that's where this comes from, and I respect the hell out of the fight for it. And on top of that, Brock Bowers, I have to make sure I at least just mention his name and bring up what he's doing. It feels like he is catching it almost feels like he's the only guy catching passes on this team right now, aside from Jacoby Myers. I feel like every time I'm watching a Raiders game and looking at the screen, it's pass to Brock Bowers, and it's also a completion to Brock Bowers. What he is doing this year is unbelievable, and he needs to, at the very least, be in the conversation of Offensive Rookie of the Year. I understand maybe there's some people that deserve it a little bit more, but he absolutely deserves to be in that conversation. Moving into the next group, we have ourselves the struggle bus category. Those teams that are not going to necessarily be hanging around 500, but they're not going to be picking somewhere within the top 5 or 6. So they're in that weird purgatory area of somewhere within the top 10, maybe just outside at 11 and 12. The struggle bus group, though, at 26, we have the New Orleans Saints, the Bears at 25, Jets at 24, Panthers at 23, and then the 49ers at 22. This is actually the smallest this group has been in quite some time. It was a pretty thick group the last few weeks. The Saints, though, from Spencer Rattler's struggles on the field to just the injuries that this team as a whole, especially on the offensive side, has been dealt with since literally what feels like week number 1, to the coaching staff and overall sideline confusion from that side of things, having no idea what was going on with the fumble going out of bounds and the clock not stopping. This is a team that has been, again, decimated by injuries, but it also feels like decimated by the firings as well, and is just in a spot where I really hope that this Saints team finally turns the page, cleans house, and goes forward with things. It feels like since the Sean Payton, Drew Brees era, this team has been trying to kick the can down the road with the way they're doing contracts and trying to keep whatever key pieces they have together intact. But this feels like the prime opportunity here. If you take another couple of losses, you're sitting at 5-12 on the season. You're probably picking somewhere within like the top 10 at the very worst. And at that point, you can then look at, all right, where do we go from here for franchise quarterback and then building key pieces around? And I know you have guys like Chris Olave, but there's a lot of old guys just scattered. And then there's players to build around, but it's time to kind of hit the reset button, in my opinion. This is one I've been kind of looking forward to for New Orleans for what feels like the last 3 years, and it's just being held over. I think this offseason is the perfect opportunity to just completely clean the slate, start over, officially move on from the Sean Payton, Drew Brees era and start looking towards the future. The Bears sitting above them at 4-11, another team that's basically just cooked and ready for next season right now. There were a couple of, really nice drives put together offensively in what was just an overall not so great game though. But I mean, you had a nice 70-yard drive that ended in 6 as Caleb Williams kind of hit his stride in this game here a little bit. And then of course he hit Keenan Allen for what was a really nice strike that led to a 45-yard touchdown as well. I mean, but aside from like just some positives in Caleb Williams, I would say maybe looking better in this game than he has in some of the last, handful of weeks or so. This was good. But other than that, you're going up against a Lions team that's basically rolling right now its way to the playoffs and is in contention for the number 1 seed in the NFC. I don't really know what it was maybe expected out of this game, aside from maybe just trying to hang on as much as possible. So 34-17, not a horrendous loss by any means. Obviously, you don't want to lose by multiple scores, but considering what I've seen the Lions do, and we've all seen this Lions do, hanging 52 points twice on opposing teams that were lesser than they are, not bad, I guess. Not bad. The Jets at 41, 4-11, sitting at number 24. There's not 40. Well, I mean, there could be 40 teams better than the Jets with the way they've been playing sometimes. But the offense, 3 drives ending in a turnover on downs. You also had a fumble as well, a missed field goal. The offense just flat out flatlining in this game here in what should have been a little bit of an advantage for you, being a team from the northeastern region of the country, playing a team that is located in Los Angeles that plays indoors. This should have been somewhat of a benefit to your end, and you basically got ground and pounded into submission. And then we have Aaron Rodgers on the Pat McAfee show saying that being fired by a teenager would be a first. I'm going to imagine that Aaron Rodgers is as good as gone and we see a full-blown reset. If it has not already been confirmed, it is all but confirmed, I would say, at this current point here. The Panthers right above them at 23. Bryce Young going 17-26 for 158 yards and a couple of touchdowns. He actually answered my call for a bounce-back game here when I was previewing that matchup between them and the Cardinals. I kind of regret not taking the Panthers there because I alluded to the fact that this team's a little hot right now, and they had some really close games against some really good football teams, and the Cardinals are in a weird space right now where, they're around 500. They've had some good wins, but they've had some tough losses as well, and it just felt like the iron was hot and the Panthers could strike here, and I ended up going safe and kicking myself on that one. Got the game wrong, obviously, as the Panthers won in OT, but you saw a nice, again, bounce back performance from Bryce Young, and Chuba Hubbard, I mean, at this point has maybe even earned more than the contract extension he was given here, but I mean 150 yards again for him, couple of touchdowns, averaging over 6 yards per attempt. the way I look at the Panthers right now, bad teams in the game that they're in fold and lose. For them, it feels like maybe they're starting to figure some things out with Dave Canales over there, and maybe Bryce Young can be the guy that they work with going forward in the interim. But it feels like there are things that you can take away, be it the really tight losses, and on top of that, now pulling a win here at an awesome win at that in overtime with like a statement run for the win. There are things turning in the Panthers' favor, and this is one of those teams that I'm kind of looking forward to seeing next year with the growth that we've seen already just in year number 1 of this Dave Canales experiment, leading with Bryce Young as his quarterback. The 49ers rounding out the group at number 22. This question has popped up a bit, and I feel like I want to ask it as well because I'm really curious to hear from you all about this. Whether you're a 49ers fan or not, I think this is a fair question to ask anyone that's just a fan of the NFL as a whole in some capacity. Based off what you have seen now from Brock Purdy this season, and it's absolutely fair to obviously bring up the injuries and just the unfortunate circumstances that the 49ers have been dealt with all season long because of those injuries. But Brock Purdy has not been perfect himself either. And my question is just simply, are you willing to pay Brock Purdy $50 million per year plus, whatever that number may be? Or would you be more comfortable with him around like 35, 40 or so? And obviously it's going to come down to what the market is. But I think at this stage, it might be fair based off injury history and also just some of the, I don't want to say lackluster performances, but there have been some up and downs for Brock Purdy this season. And again, I know you can point to some of the injuries, but everyone's dealing with injuries. And maybe the 49ers a little bit more so with just key and crucial players to their offense. Fair enough. But are you willing to hand him $50 million a year? I'm very curious to hear what you all say, but let me know in the comment section because this 49ers team obviously in a really bad way right now. Moving into the Jeff Fisher category, the teams hanging around 500, maybe just outside the playoffs, looking in at number 21 at the bottom of the group, the Indianapolis Colts. At 20, we have the Dallas Cowboys. At 19, the Cardinals. 18, the Dolphins. 17 are the Bengals. 16, the Seahawks. And 15, the Buccaneers. It's actually the biggest the Jeff Fisher category has been in quite some time. But we're looking at a ton of teams sitting at 7-8 and 8-7. These are the Jeff Fisher teams, literally. That being said, the Colts. Jonathan Taylor answering the call, basically putting his apology to all of Colts Nation out on the football field to the tune of 29 carries for 218 yards and 3 touchdowns, helping lead the Colts in a winning effort over the Tennessee Titans here. I definitely think you can accept that apology after he dropped the touchdown going into the end zone last week against Denver here. I don't really know what to make of this Colts team because they are so imperfect in so many ways, and I feel like picking somewhere along the lines of like 20th overall in this year's draft or wherever it is that they wind up being, maybe a little bit closer to 16 after things shake out if they lose another game or two. I don't really understand how these wins are benefiting them because this team has been kind of stuck in a near 500 purgatory for what feels like the better part of 3, maybe 4 years now. And it's just kind of frustrating because you get games like this where the Colts are winning so handedly and then they nearly let the Tennessee Titans storm back on them. And then you get performances like last week. I just don't know what to make of this Colts team. And it's like a perennial Jeff Fisher-esque team, if you ask me. The Cowboys at number 20. Cooper Rush, honestly, really putting it together over the last month or so here. And crazy enough, with all the conversation that was surrounding Mike McCarthy's job security maybe a month ago, the Cowboys are 4-1 right now in their last 5. And yes, they're eliminated from playoff contention, but they went into that game this week knowing that they were eliminated, and they still went out, played their asses off, and potentially took away the playoff hopes of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because they no longer control their destiny. They need to win out and also have some things go their way. I've got to say, I respect the hell out of that effort. You don't really see that from a lot of teams. So especially considering the state that the Dallas Cowboys are in, both health-wise and just with what we've seen with some of the decision-making that went on coming into this season here, for them to be fighting the way they are. Again, 4-1 in their last 5. Pretty impressive stuff. So I'll tip my cap to that. The Cardinals at 19, a devastating loss for Arizona. You're getting knocked out of the playoff race. You're losing to a team that going into it had only 3 victories. You lose James Conner in the second half, and that ultimately kind of stalled out the running game a bit. After winning only 4 games, though, last season and seeing where this team now resides at 7-8, you have the opportunity to maybe win even one more game and double your win total from last season. It's clear that this Cardinals team has taken a step in the right direction. And at the very least, there's progress being made, even if maybe playoff hopes were getting dashed and they were maybe a little far-fetched and a lot to ask for a team that people didn't really expect to be this close to the playoff picture this late in the season. It's exciting to at least know this team took a big step forward, even if it maybe wasn't as far as you wanted that step to be, considering how close you kind of got. The Dolphins at 18. Vegas had them as home underdogs, -2. That was by DraftKings. I don't know what all the other places had, and I'm not a bettor. It's just NFL Pro uses DraftKings for their betting odds on there, so I see them when I'm looking at some of the statistics on there. You go into that game kind of disrespected. Again, home underdogs to a 49ers team that has not looked good for quite a bit now. You come in, Devon Achane steps on the football field and looks like a bona fide superstar. And honestly, this is a game where you left points on the board as well. Like, Devon Achane going for nearly 200 total yards aside. I mean, Tyreek Hill dropped a touchdown early in the game where you had to settle for 3. So, this game it wasn't really that close to begin with, but it could have been even further apart. Like, this is one of those scoreboard lied just because of some, just an untimely drop by Hill in the first quarter, again, that you settle for 3 with. This game could have very easily been, a 20-point game when everything was all said and done. So hats off to the Dolphins. In the thick of the AFC playoff race, it's tight. They have a shot. They need some things to fall their way, but the Dolphins are in a really good position right now, sitting at 7-8. The Bengals, I have them right above the Dolphins, sitting at number 17. The hope is there. Do you believe that they can get it done? I think there is a real conversation that needs to be had, and I'm going to start it right now because I'm curious if other people are feeling the same way. If the Bengals find their way into the playoffs, if everything that breaks their way, which is basically Cincinnati has to win out, they need Denver to lose in week 18, and or Miami and Indianapolis lose or tie a game, one of those two. If Cincinnati wins out and gets into the playoffs, the numbers that Joe Burrow has are borderline the best numbers by a quarterback this season. I would say he and Lamar Jackson, statistically speaking, just flat out numbers. Those are the two guys you should really be having the discussion about in terms of the MVP race if the Bengals were far further along and actually in the playoffs at this current point and not fighting to potentially get in. If he can somehow drag this team to the playoffs with how poor that defense has been for them this season, Joe Burrow needs legit MVP conversation. So I want to put that out into the ether right now because this is someone that has not gotten the love he deserves for everything that he's been doing. And if the Bengals make it, man, all bets are off because it's tough trying to score 30-something points a game to win, but the Bengals are doing it, and there's only a handful of offenses that I could look at right now where I go, all right, they could maybe go shot for shot with what the Bengals have going on over there between Burrow and Chase because they're absolutely cooking right now. The Seahawks at 16, pressured another 17 times. Geno Smith has another couple of interceptions, one of them obviously being the game losing. He has 10 interceptions this season facing the pressure, and just the offensive line has struggled mightily protecting him. And this has gone back now for years, and we've touched on this a few times here, but that is a bit of an issue. And then, of course, the inability to run the football, which again can maybe stem back to the offensive line struggles again. Winning out does get you the division. The hope is still there, but I'm starting to think that this might end up being a Seahawks team that is just on the outside looking in. And then the Bengals rounding out the group at number 15 at 8-7 here. As we kind of touched on a little bit earlier, you literally had the division in your hands. You win out and it was yours. Now you have to win out and hope that ATL drops another game because you got swept by them earlier in the season. You had a few just really untimely turnovers, especially late in the game. Deron Bland's game-saving play to basically literally put the football game away is just an absolute killer for Tampa Bay. maybe I'm a little bit disappointed. Sour grapes because I picked them to win the game slightly as well, but that's just a game you can't lose. You're going up against a team that literally knew going into the game their playoff hopes were dead with the slim chance that they had. You had everything to play for, and just too many mistakes cost you a football game, cost you a division, and with how tough the NFC is right now, potentially cost you a playoff berth. Moving into the playoff hopefuls, though, top 14 teams in the NFL. As a reminder, the top 14 must include a division champion from all 8 divisions, and then you also have yourself the remaining wildcard teams, 3 from each conference as well, so from the AFC and NFC. So I need to have 7 AFC teams, 7 NFC teams. Keep that in mind. That being said, at number 14, the Atlanta Falcons at the bottom of the group here. Broncos sitting at number 13, Texans at 12, Chargers at 11, Rams at 10, Commanders at 9, Steelers at 8, and then the Baltimore Ravens rounding out the group at number 7. The Falcons, Michael Penix's debut, I would say, is solid. I mean, he had an interception. It was a tipped pick, not a big deal. 18 of 27, 202 yards. Hopefully Drake London's all right with his injury and he's not too banged up. But the big thing that I really want to highlight, more so than the offense right now, is just the defense and what they were able to do in this game, and honestly what this defense has been doing over the last month or so. Their pass rush prior to 4 games ago was dead last by a mile, it felt like. Currently, right now, as it stands, in the last 4 games that they've played, they've racked up 16 sacks. And that's in comparison to the 12 over the first 11 games of the season. They're still last, but they have significantly closed the gap. And it seems like they've figured something out. I'm very curious to see if this holds, because Atlanta right now, if their pass rush has finally figured it out, that'll really help out the back end of the defense. And if Michael Penix can just take care of the football as he gets comfortable these next 2 weeks, and he's got some really easy games on the schedule as well. This was a really good time. And honestly, you could have started with the Raiders, in my opinion. So you could have given him another game under his belt too, because based off what you got from Kirk Cousins against the Raiders, I think you could have got that and maybe better from Penix last week as well. You could have given him 4 games to get himself ready and hopefully lead you to the playoffs. So now instead of 3, so just another game under his belt, which I guess is nitpicking. But the way I see it right now, Penix, if he can just get better each week, take care of the football, defense is figuring it out, pass rush is starting to not only get pressure, but get home on top of that. Just keep an eye on Atlanta right now, because this is an interesting turn of events that we've been seeing for the last month or so. The Broncos, 13, 9-6, tale of 2 halves for this football team. Shot out of a cannon, you get 3 straight touchdowns, and then it's just a couple of field goals that sandwiched a boatload of punts. I don't know what happened, because that Broncos team did not look the same, and maybe it had something to do with the field goal kick, the free kick that they allowed, but it was like you went into halftime and just folded, or you didn't change what you were doing. And then, of course, everyone's talking about Bo Nix, and he's averaging 3.3 air yards per attempt, which is his lowest of the season. I think his second lowest is 3.6. But I don't know what happened. The offense just seemed way too afraid to push the football down the field. And it's not like the Chargers were completely pressuring them to death or anything like that. Yeah, they were getting home sometimes and at least making them uncomfortable, but it just was a really weird game to watch, just from a 1,000-yard view type of deal. To see Denver come out the way they did and then just completely collapse in the second half. I mean, you got to give credit to the Chargers, I guess, and what they did defensively, but I just did a bizarre game. In my opinion, I think Denver's still good enough that they're going to find themselves in the playoffs and hold out some of these teams that are 7-8, praying that they drop another football game. But as it stands right now, I do still like Denver's odds. I think they're, good coaching. Rookie quarterback's been pretty good for the most part this season. Sans a few games here and there. Really good defense that it just struggled in the second half. And I don't even know if I want to put too much on them, as the offense was just starting to sputter out and not really do anything for them on the other side. Eventually, you're going to start to run out of gas and steam. I still think the Broncos, though, good playoff team, and they probably wind up being that number 7 seed. Texans at number 12, division winner of the AFC South, but at 9-6 here. Thoughts and prayers obviously going out to Tank Dell. Really unfortunate. And that is kind of concerning for me with Houston right now because, one, the wide receiver room already thin, missing Stephon Diggs, now missing Tank Dell as well. This is not what you wanted your wide receiver room to look like as you're getting set for your playoff push. Couple that with the fact that the O-line has been a bit of a pressure point for the struggles that this team has been dealing with offensively. I think you really need to look at CJ Stroud and go, listen, man, you're the franchise guy. You've had 2 really good years to start off your career. But at this point now, we need you to really take over, elevate some of these other pass catchers that we have not named, obviously Nico Collins and Dalton Schultz, and get somebody to even if just not be on par, but like just a little bit less than what we were getting out of, Tank Dell. He was granted struggling, but like you need someone to step up, and you need CJ Stroud to elevate him to that level, because I don't know if the offense will be enough with just Tank Dell and Joe Mixon, who has been good on the ground for the most part this season, but has been spotty in some games. So I trust the defense. I really do. It's just the offense right now is battered, bruised, and struggling in the worst places possible. The Chargers at 11. You needed Justin Herbert to win this game, and he absolutely did, racking up over 300 total yards of offense between his arm and his legs. Couple of touchdowns to boot on top of that, with the running game kind of in a tough way. He obviously had the big rushing touchdown that put things away late for Gus the Bus. But overall, I think the defense needs a real big credit in this one here because, again, like we talked about with the Broncos just a second ago, they come shot out of a cannon, 3 straight drives, 3 straight touchdowns. They're literally pulling no punches, going 70 yards each and every single time. But the defense rallied, slowed the game down a bit for them, buckled down big time in the second half, allowing just a couple of field goals as the offense caught steam, helps them run away with the football game. The defense really needs a lot of credit for what happened in this game here. Like, yes, Justin Herbert did a lot to make sure they won this football game, but the defense buckling down, not folding after just back-to-back opening scoring drives. Big credit to them there. Rams at number 10. This is their division to lose at this point here. And I've got to say, major credit for going across country into the cold climate that is the Northeast right now, because believe me, it is freezing up here at this current moment. Going into that weather, and you go, okay, it's cold, going to be tough to throw the football in this type of weather. Kyren Williams, show him what you got. 23 carries, 122 yards, a touchdown, a cold ground and pound game plan gets you the victory here. Something that only Sean McVay, who loves his passing offense, could just pivot so hard to the left and go, yeah, today we're run first. Let's see what you got, Williams. And he gave you plenty. You host both games that you have left against Arizona and Seattle. Beat them both. You're in. You secure the division. You are good to go. Get it done. Commanders sitting at number 9. Not too often that you lose the turnover battle, and you lose the turnover battle 5-2 and still win a football game. But Jaden Daniels coming through big time in this one here. 5 touchdowns with the 339 total yards that he put together here, reminding everyone that he's probably your offensive rookie of the year front runner at the very least. But that being said, the defense doing enough to bend and not break. I mean, Saquon Barkley has just been kind of embarrassing defenses all season long. So, yeah, you let up about 150 yards, but you held them to a handful of field goals late in that football, or basically the back half of the football game. So, again, a lot of bending, but not breaking, doing enough to hold on as your offense was finding ways to score. Big team victory, I would say here. Yes, you benefited from Jalen Hurts going down in that football game, but the offense still did find a decent amount of success moving the football. And again, a lot of turnovers came from your offense. Credit to the defense. Bend, but did not break in this one here. Steelers at 10-5, sitting at number 8. Simply put, this offense needs George Pickens back. This offense is night and day different without him being, and the way I see it right now, George Pickens is a guy who, in my opinion, is probably he's a top 10 receiver in my opinion. I don't know if that sounds crazy to some people, and I'd say he might even be higher than that because of just his playmaking ability is absurd, but also his hands have got to be some of the best in the league, especially when it comes to like some of those circus catches he makes. There's not a lot of people that catch the football the way George Pickens can in some of those crazy scenarios. So he needs to be back because offenses, I feel like, defenses aren't really being forced to respect the passing game as much without him. Like, yes, Calvin Austin deserves a ton of credit for some of the stuff that he's putting together over the last few weeks, but you need George Pickens back in this offense to help balance you out as a unit and force defenses to play a little bit more honestly with you. So that's my biggest issue there. Don't know what happened to the run defense. That was not, from a team that has been really good against the run this season, not exactly what I was expecting, but just a tough day overall for the Steelers in that loss. And then Baltimore on the flip side of things, right above them at number 7 here, also sitting at 10-5. Derrick Henry was ready for a vengeance here, going for 162 yards rushing. The big thing I had to point out for this, because I talked about it in my preview, I questioned it coming out of the game the first time that these two teams played here. Baltimore ran the ball 38 times in this football game here. If you didn't know the number from the previous game, it was only 19. They literally doubled their rushing attempts. I don't know why they went away from the run so much the last time that these two teams played, because they averaged like 5 yards a carry or something like that the first time around as well. They just decided to not run the football as much for whatever the reason may be. This time around, I literally made it a point. I was like, run the damn football. Challenge that again. You had a great yards per attempt average the first time around. Like, challenge that. See if that was a weakness and something you should have exploited more. And the fact that they ran the ball damn near 40 times down the Steelers' throat shows you that there was a path to success there even the first time around. So awesome to see that. Lamar looked good in this game as well. 3 touchdowns, only a pick to boot on top of that. Defense found just as much of success this time around as they did the first game as well. Offense just figured it out, and they got the job done in convincing fashion in Baltimore to now put themselves in a good spot to potentially win this division come season end. And then to wrap up the best of the best here, there is 2 teams that swapped. The Steelers got dropped out. You obviously haven't seen the Packers, who were holding the top spot of the playoff hopefuls. Well, the Packers are sitting at number 6 now in the Super Bowl contenders category. Vikings at number 5, Chiefs at number 4, Lions at 3, Bills at 2, and Eagles at number 1. I know for a fact I'm going to hear it about this here. Just let me explain. Packers at 11-4. Wasn't even a close contest. This team is primed and ready for a run. You have a hapless Saints team coming in to play you in Lambeau. They are just beaten, battered, and bruised. That's exactly the type of game that you're supposed to have. You post the first shutout of the season. I mean, you got plenty enough to prove next week against the Minnesota Vikings, but this was a game that you were supposed to come in and have this type of game, and you did. Excellent work by the Packers. The Vikings at number 5, 13-2. Every week that passes, I believe in this team more and more, and I'm buying in further and further. Sam Darnold, that 39-yard strike to win the go-ahead score, I guess I should say, to put them in the lead to Justin Jefferson. He has proven at this point, with, again, this 32 touchdowns that he's thrown this season, that he can go shot for shot with the best offenses in the NFL. And this is coming from somebody who, in the very first half of the season, and even trailing into like the back half early on as well, I was not buying it. I was trying to find all the bad in all of his game. I'll admit it. I'm wrong. Whatever he's got going in Kevin O'Connell's system right now, it's working, and it's working extremely well. I'm excited to keep seeing it happen, and I really hope this doesn't lead to like a one-and-done situation for Minnesota in the playoffs here. I'm very curious to see how he fares in the bright lights in that situation. Defense closed out the game big time. You held to Seattle to a 60-yard field goal attempt that they obviously missed, and then an interception to wrap up the game. Minnesota is just about as complete as they come right now. The Chiefs right above them at 14-1. Defense has been great all year without question. I've never really had much of an issue at all, if any, with the Chiefs defense here. This offense, though, it needs to start being talked about now that Marquise Brown is back in the fold, and Isaiah Pacheco as well. This offense is only going to continue to open up more and more these next couple of weeks, and the scariest thing is that this Chiefs team could literally be at their very best come the playoffs. They win next week and they're good. They have themselves the bye week. They can rest if they need to for a week going into, which I don't know how I feel, because I feel like resting week 18 and having the bye off is a little too much rest and would make you maybe a little rusty. But at the same time, this is a Chiefs team that could be at their absolute best come the divisional round of the playoffs. Patrick Mahomes, in his last 7 games, and what has not been a great season for him overall, has thrown 10 touchdowns to just 2 interceptions. He has cleaned it up far and away, just a completely different player from the first half of the season and some of the struggles this offense was dealing with and just him throwing bad throws and getting picked off. He's cleaned it up. You now have DeAndre Hopkins and Marquise Brown to take attention away from a young Xavier Worthy who is really starting to blossom in this offense. Isaiah Pacheco's back, runs as hard as anyone in the NFL. You have Kareem Hunt behind him, who has a damn point to prove clearly with the way he's been running as well. The defense, like I said, has been great all season long. I've had no issues, but the offense seems to be figuring it out, and I kept them at number 4. I wanted to maybe put them a little bit higher, but the other teams ahead of them keep winning, except for the Eagles, and we'll get to that in a second. But this team is as good as they come, and honestly, they probably need to be higher in my list, but I'm going to keep them at number 4 right now because they have scared me for a vast majority of the season, and right now I'm more so just kind of looking a little bit ahead and thinking, man, this team could really be a problem. The Lions at number 3, you came away with 2 wins in this game. Obviously, the W, but secondly, no injuries to the defense. The exact type of win you want here. A good win over a division rival that is down and out, and nobody walked away hurt. Considering the amount of people you have sitting on the IR right now, that is a second win in a game that you won. Jared Goff goes for over 300 yards. Got another 100 yards on the ground from Jahmyr Gibbs. Defense allowed 17 points. Couple of takeaways. That was a game that Detroit wanted to have, should have had, and did have. The Bills at number 2. At 12-3, ugly. This was an ugly win. Buffalo came in very clearly sleepwalking. I would have to imagine, especially in Buffalo, they probably came into this game going, we're about to smack this team around, and were clearly not actually ready to play this football game at the level that they needed to be ready for. It's a division game, so it'll always be like that. You'll always get the best punch from your division rivals out of any game you play, barring like 2 top dogs going head-to-head in like Buffalo and Kansas City. But, I mean, the Patriots basically gave you a better fight than Kansas City did, all things considered. That being said, good teams, when they find themselves in those situations where maybe they sleptwalked into a trap game, do find those ways to still come out victorious. And yeah, you were down 14-0, but you went 24 unanswered to ultimately win the game. Yeah, you allowed a touchdown late in the game that, again, made the scoreboard look a little bit closer than you'd want it to be, but that really doesn't matter to me because how many onside kicks have we seen recovered this season? I think like 3, maybe. 3 out of the 45 or something that have been tried. The number is stupidly low. So good on the Bills for getting the win. Can't do that again, though. Cannot do that again. And obviously, like the number 1 seeds kind of out of grasp right now. Like you'd really need Kansas City to fumble away the next 2 games and you win out to be able to get the number 1 seed. But you can't be doing that type of thing right now. Even if it wouldn't affect you in the grand scheme of things in the terms of the playoff picture, you just can't be doing that this late in the season. Excuse me. And then at number 1, the Philadelphia Eagles. I don't want to sound like I'm making an excuse. I'm not an Eagles fan. I'm not an Eagles sympathizer or anything like that. I'm not a Glazer, none of that stuff. Whatever you want to call me. I'm just really disappointed that Jalen Hurts went down with a concussion in this game because you have to wonder with how 5 different drives ended with them settling for a field goal. They managed 4 field goals and they missed one of them. You have to wonder how this game goes if Jalen Hurts is there. They have to respect what he's been doing the last few weeks throwing the football, and things are maybe opened up a little bit more for Saquon Barkley because he already had 150 yards and 2 touchdowns, and you didn't have the threat of Jalen Hurts there for you. I don't want to say that was a fluke win for Washington because it's not. A win is a win, but this team overall from top to bottom, I still feel pretty damn strongly about as the best team in the NFL at this current point. Like it takes a lot for me to put teams at number 1. And so I don't want to just rip them off the number 1 seat because they lost their quarterback to a concussion, literally like at the beginning of the football game, essentially. And then damn near won the football game still going down 3. And it's just unfortunate that Jalen Hurts went down here. I'm still bought in on the Eagles. Not too worried about what happened this week with them losing. It sucks that might have screwed things up for them and potentially winning the number 1 seed in the NFC if things broke their way. But I still look at this team right now, just from top to bottom. Overall, I like them the most. They're one of the healthiest teams in the league right now, all things considered. On top of that, I really like Philadelphia. So yeah, tough loss. Not great to have at this point in the season, but I'm going to just fade the overreaction and not kick them out of the number 1 spot just because they lost the football game. But those are my power rankings going into week 17. As always, if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it. Fire away in the comment section down below. Let me hear from you. What am I right on? What am I wrong about? Let me hear your rankings, all that and then some. But as always, I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.